guys, Sharon Lewin here, and guess what? I'm going to talk about the school governing bodies again. So I'm starting a school governing body series because you can never talk enough about the school governing body, and we know that school governing bodies need to be trained because it's a responsible job and there are so many complexities and so many things that school governing bodies need to understand and need to know, so that they, whenever they take decisions, that they take the decisions in the best interest of the school. So just a bit of background about the school governing bodies, something that I think we tend to neglect because we're just getting used to the idea that we have school governing bodies, but we forget that the school governing body is in fact the largest grassroots governance structure. Right, you can see there in the South African Schools Act 84 of 1996, you have the school governing bodies functions outlined for you. But if you look at the national governance structure that we have in the country, then you can see that the school governing body is in fact the one layer where the voices of your ordinary community members will be heard, and you have representation from all the different stakeholders who are involved in education at our schools. So just think back, your governance structure in the country for schools, you'll have right on top, you'll have the national governance structure, and you'll have the Minister of Basic Education heading that national governance structure, right? Then at provincial level, your governance structure is headed by the HOD, or the head of department of your provincial education system. And then of course you have your school governing body representing at the community level all the stakeholders, like your educators, like your support staff at the school, your parents, and of course your learners if you are a high school. So the school governing body is a very exciting structure that we have. It's a very important but also very exciting structure, because that is the structure that can help the community get directly involved in how we want to shape the education of our children, right? So we mustn't forget that, and if you look at the elections that we have in the country, we have the national and provincial elections, we have local elections, and then we have the school governing body elections. The school governing body elections are in fact the fourth largest elections that we have, but we don't really spend time talking about the importance of it. It's also just done in a way where people are just informed, but there's no enthusiasm, no serious advocacy, other than just reminding people, don't forget to stand for election, because then you'll have a voice. But I think we need to put a little bit more energy around even our advocacy when we do the school governing body elections. Okay, so that is my rant for the morning. Right, so like I said, when you have your school governing body, then all the stakeholders are represented there, your educators, your parents, your learners, and even your support staff members. And all those school governors, they form the governance structure. And so the power and the authority are vested in all those governors. You don't have a hierarchical structure in the governing body. You don't have, for example, the principal being, because he or she is the principal of the school, he or she has a bigger voice in the school governing body. And the same with the educators that you have at the on school governing body level. Those representatives of that constituency, the educators at the school, those educator reps have the same power and authority like the principal and like the parents. And then of course your parents are equal partners at this on school governing body level, guys. You don't have any additional power or authority over your parents in the school governing body. Everybody's voices are equal, and I think that is part of the challenge, and that is the complexity, because you have so many different stakeholders forming part of your school governing body, and everybody's coming with their own set of knowledge, their own experience, their own expertise, their own skills, and so you have this mixed bag And that makes it very difficult for many school governing bodies to strike some kind of balance or to have, a good relationship at that level. I'm mentioning that because the research that I do, and I do quite a bit of reading, and that's besides just reading about the legalities of the school governing body. And you can see many of the researchers will speak about the challenges of school governing bodies, and one of the chief problems that they highlight is the educational level of our parents, and the fact that parents don't always understand, and there's so much pressure on the other stakeholders in the school governing body to assist. Now, I think that is something that we need to flip, because one is, yes, one can understand the parents, in many cases, the parents' educational levels are low. The parents are not directly involved in education, so they don't understand the language, they don't understand the complexities of what is happening in education. But that is why you have the school governing body, because the idea is that the other members on your school governing body must help, and to get the parents to understand what the complexities are, what the challenges are, and then do it in a way where parents are not undermined, but do it in a way where you want to provide the knowledge, you want to provide the information, and you want to help the parents understand the context so that they can help you make a collective decision at the end of the day. So that is something that I think perhaps the researchers should look at, because there's a lot of focus on, parents complaining about their own illiteracy, parents complaining about their own struggles when they're on the governing body. And then, of course, you have the educators and the principals moaning and groaning about the lack of capacity of your governors, especially if they are parents. But I think we must flip that, because we must begin to think how we can help our parents to gain the information, to gain that knowledge, to obtain that knowledge so that they can help, and not just complain about the lack of knowledge that parents have. Their inability to understand all the dynamics of what is happening in education. Because our parents are intelligent people, they know what is going on. Once you explain to them and they can understand all those complexities and dynamics, then they will be able to participate in the discussions, and they have valuable ideas that we need to respect, and that will help us come up with a decision that will see that we are taking into account the interests of all the parties at the school. Okay, so that is part of my intention, that we just need to revisit how we approaching our training, how we, what our attitudes or perceptions are when we come into the school governing body meetings, and whether we shouldn't have a continuous, training program for parents so that they can understand, and just give them, bite-sized bits of information rather than storming them and asking them to make so many decisions about so many important issues at the school. That is the one thing that I thought I would like to underscore, because if you look at the South African Schools Act, where the functions of your school governing body is outlined, you'll see there in section 16.2, it says that, and I think I do have, let me just close this, and bring that up. Yeah, there we go. So the South African Schools Act 84 of 1996, section 16, subsection 2 says that the SGB stands in a position of trust towards the school. Now, that is very important, that particular legal phrase, when you stand in a position of trust, should be explained to all the members or all the governors on the school governing body, because it's not just an understanding of that you need to be, trustworthy. But if you stand in a position of trust, then it means that you have the power and authority to make decisions that will be favorable towards the your group that you are serving. And in this case, you're serving the school. You're not serving your individual interest, the constituency that you represent. For example, if you are an educator, it doesn't mean that when you're on the governing body that you come in there with your hostile attitude and that you always have to push the agendas of the educators. No. The same with the parents. The parents are not just they are representing the parent constituency, but when they sit on the governing body, they are there in that role to ensure that the interests of all the stakeholders are being serviced, right? So that is a dynamic that I think we need to understand, because in my view, I think when the educators and the parents, and of course if it's a high school, then the learners, when you're on the school governing body, you may think that you're operating there just as a representative of your constituency, the group that elected or nominated you to be elected as a school governor. Now they've elected you, yes, to be representative of them, to be their voice on the school governing body. But when you get to the school governing body as a governor, then you must balance your personal or constituents' interests with the interests of the other constituents as well. Right? So you are now in a stewardship role. You like a parent, or you like somebody who works with young people, like the educators at school. The educators are the stewards of the children. They have the power and the authority to ensure that the best interests of the children are served, and that the children are protected, right? So educators can't come in there and just think of themselves and take advantage of their seniority as a person. No, the teacher's role is there always to put the children's needs first and balance that with his or her needs. Now the same with your school governors. When you're on the school governing body, you're not there as an individual. You're part of a collective. You're part of that group, of that decision-making group, of that power group that must help to ensure that all the stakeholders, all the constituencies' needs are met, and that you have to discuss that and then make decisions that will suit everybody. Okay? And so it probably sounds like I'm making it more complicated than it is. But I think if you're going in there with your educator hat on, then that is a problem, because once you enter that room, you are an educator, but you are a school governor. You are one of the stewards who must help the school to reach its goal, and that is provide quality education for all the learners. And so whatever decision you make, that must be uppermost in your mind. And so when you make a decision, it's not how are the educators going to respond to this. It's how will our children benefit from this, and what kind of trade-offs do we have to make to ensure that we're making the right decisions. Okay? In my view, the only person really who has a very difficult, challenging position is the principal. Because the principal is the nature of his or her job, the principal is a member of the school governing body. So the school principal is also a school governor. But at the same time, because the principal is also the principal of the school, the principal is also the representative of the head of education when he or she is part of that school governing body. So the principal is in a very difficult position, because the principal has to answer to the head of education, and the principal has to answer to the school governing body. So the principal will have quite a struggle to try and find a balance between those two often conflicting roles that he or she has. And we can see how tensions can really boil over. We've had cases like that last year here in the Western Cape, where you have the principal having to respond to what the school governing body is saying, what is in the best interest of the school, and then of course you have the head of education that will make certain demands on the principal. So for me, the principal is really the only person who has that dual complex role on the school governing body. But if you look at your educators don't have, the educator reps don't have that kind of pressure that the principal has, and neither do your parents have that kind of pressure, you know. So I think we mustn't try to absorb the complexities that the principal is facing. We need to keep our minds focused clearly on the fact that we need to look after the interests of our school community as a collective, and then whatever decisions are taken there should satisfy those interests rather than looking at what our constituency is saying and then just pushing that line in your school governing body meetings. Okay? And I'm rambling on, and I hope that makes sense. So if you stand in a position of trust, it means that you need to take ethical decisions. Your decisions must be clear. There must be no hidden agenda. You mustn't try to harm any of the other stakeholders. You must ensure that whatever decision you take is always in the best interest of the entire school. It's really all about the common good. So that, I think, is something that, you know, when you undergo any kind of training, that needs to be understood, that when you walk into your school governing body meetings, you are now a school governor. You must ensure that you strike a balance between all the interests of the various constituencies that you represent, because at the end of the day, the decision must be a sound, good, ethical decision that will suit all the parties that are represented by that school governing body. Okay? Yes, I thought that is something that I want to underscore, because there could be an identity crisis when we have our school governing bodies, right? Where people think that they need to be in an adversarial role, they need to just go in there and protect the interests of the stakeholders that they represent. Now, that is just your school governing body with your school governors. But remember, the South African Schools Act makes provision for the school governing bodies to institute various committees. And the Act also allows you to co-opt many other people to help you carry out your duties as a school governing body. And that, for me, is another area that I think we're not quite exploiting. You know, you just have the school governing body with the representatives there. Then, of course, you do have your school committees at the actual school, but it's not common practice for school governing bodies to co-opt additional members to the SGB, and there's really no specific number. It's you're not limited to indicate how many people you must or that you are allowed to co-opt. Now, I know co-option takes place especially when there's a vacancy in the SGB and you have to fulfill different functions like recruitment and selection. Then school governing bodies tend to apply that provision. But, if you look at your communities, there are so many people who would love to help schools. There are so many people with different talents, different gifts, ranging from financial gifts to physical gifts that they have for the school. But often community members don't know how to approach that, how to help the school. Now, if the school governing body understands that you are allowed to co-opt more people onto your school governing body, but they do not have voting rights, and you're going to co-opt them because they have a particular skill, a particular talent, or a particular resource that they can help you with, then why not explore that part that the law allows you to have? That you can do these co-options, and that perhaps you just need people to explain to you exactly how to go about it, right? So, when we're talking about our school governing bodies and we're talking about the training and how can we capacitate our school governing bodies, then my view is that we need to start looking at how can we take advantage of that co-option principle that is part of the South African Schools Act concerning school governing bodies. And then perhaps that is an opportunity that, that will help schools flourish more, and it will help school governing bodies to have a bigger pool of resources. And yes, it's going to require quite a bit of organization and quite a bit of management. But just imagine there's a lawyer in your community, and that lawyer would love to get involved in your school by offering you advice, by allowing you to take advantage of the services that he or she has. And you open that door for that lawyer to come in and help you whenever you need legal advice. Okay? Or you could have an auditor down the road, or an accountant, or a doctor. Now just imagine that those people are waiting for you to open the door to tell you how, to tell them how you can use these skills, and here you bring them on board to come and help you with the various areas where they can plow in their skills and their knowledge. Okay, something that I think we need to start looking at. So guys, that is sort of the introduction to the school governing body series. And I thought, let me just remind us that the school governing body is a very, very important structure. There are so many opportunities where the school governing body can be helped to flourish and work differently, and take advantage of all those volunteers out there who would love to be part of your structure. And then, of course, the other important point that I wanted to that I wanted to underscore, is the fact that your school governing body stands in a position of trust. So you must be ethical, you must make good decisions, and you must see that it's part of your stewardship to protect the interest and to serve the interest of the entire school community, and not only your narrow group, the one group that helped you to become elected as a school governor. So hopefully this introduction was useful. You can let me know in the comments what you think of the points that I made, and then I will see you in part 2 for another discussion on the school governing body role in our schools. Cheerio!